Hi, this is Anna, and welcome back to my channel, Real Raw Rentals. I only became a rental property owner 1 year ago, so this is my 1 year update on the first property I purchased. So my first full month of owning the property was October of 2020. In the month of October, I got the prorated rent of $604.38, and that was based off of how long I owned the property in September. I had a property management fee of 10% of that prorated rent. Then I also got my October rent, the property management fee for October, and then utilities. Now with utilities, the tenant pays the utilities every month, but for some reason, depending on when they pay the utilities in the month, it sometimes shows as I have to pay it, and then the next month, once they've paid it, I'll be credited this amount. So overall, I pay $0 in utility fees, and that will become clear at the end of the video when you see my totals for the whole year for each of these 4 categories. Now I also had to pay a one-time insurance fee of $100, and I paid that in October. Also, I should have mentioned that when I got this property, it came rented. That probably was clear given that I had rent starting in my first month, but just to be extra clear. So here are my totals for the month in terms of rent, property management fees, and utilities. Down here I've just summed my total income, expenses, and I had net income for the month of $1,553.12. Now, as you see, as we continue, that is way higher than I normally get. And the reason for that is that this is technically about 1.5 months versus just 1 month of rent. And also, I usually have a mortgage payment each month. But because this is my first month of owning the property, my mortgage payments didn't start until the 1st of November. So continuing down to November, you can see here my mortgage payment shows up. I also have my rent, my property management fee, and the utilities. So this negative 83 cents is a bit confusing. The reason it's only 83 cents is because the tenant repaid what they owed in utilities from October. However, I had to pay for what they owe in November. So the values were very similar, which is why they basically canceled out and came to negative 83 cents. Again, my total income, total expenses, this left me with a net income of $414.96. And as we continue on, you'll see that this value is very close to what I generally expect to get each month, assuming there are no major maintenance or other issues that I have to pay for. So continuing down, we've got December. I'm going to go through the rest of the months fairly quickly because, as you'll see, they're almost all the same. But feel free to pause the video at any time so that you can go through the numbers yourself. So again, I've got my mortgage, I've got my rent, property management fee, and utilities. The utilities this month were $0. So this is my perfectly stereotypical month because I have my mortgage, my rent, my property management fees, and no utilities or repairs or anything else like that. So I come out with a net income of $415.76. So this value is my cash flow for the month. Continuing down, January of 2021, we're in the new year. Again, basically the same, just with some utilities. Same with next month, utilities, but everything else is the same. Continuing down, you'll see the same exact pattern for all of these. Again, feel free to pause at any time if you want to look closer at the numbers. And then it's not until July of 2021 that things change a little bit. The reason things have changed is because my rent increased by $50 per month. Because my rent increased by $50 per month, that means my property management fee increased by $5 per month because my property management fee is 10% of the rent. Therefore, I had an increase in rent of $50 per month, an increase in property management fees of $5 per month, and so the difference is an overall gain of $45 per month. Everything else, though, is the same in terms of my mortgage payment, my utility payment, which again sums out to $0 in the long run. And so you can see total income, total expenses, and then my net income down here. Again, August, you'll see the same situation, just no utilities. And continuing down to September, the only difference in September is that my property management company requires me to pay a management fee of $100 per month. That's assuming that they didn't place a new tenant. If they did, then I have to pay 100% of the first month of the new tenant's rent. And moving on, again, this is all the same. You can pause if you want. And so now we've gotten to my year 1 overall review. If I scroll down here so we can see it a little better, I had a net rent of $15,740. Now, for the rent and for all these other values, I have basically just ignored October of 2020 and not added that to these values. The reason for that is because that month is really not representative of a typical month, because I had 1.5 months of rent in that month and because I didn't have a mortgage payment. So instead, these numbers are based off of the 12 months from November of 2020 through October of 2021. So overall, the sum of the rent was $15,740. Property management fees were $1,674. Mortgage payments were $8,996.52, and utilities, like I said, summed out to be zero. That leaves me with a total income equal to the rent. My total expenses are my management fees plus my mortgage, which comes out to $10,670.52. Now, typically, you would have to take into account your property taxes and your yearly insurance. I don't have to take that into account because that's all escrowed in my monthly mortgage payment. That being said, this one-year review stops at October of 2021, and in November of 2021, my mortgage payment increased because my property taxes increased and my insurance increased a bit. So overall, we've got the income, expenses, and that left me with a net income for the year of $5,069.48. Now, to me, that seems like a decent amount of money for my first year with one property. But just looking at this one value doesn't really tell you anything because it doesn't take into account how much money you had to spend to get the property. So the next numbers will go into more information on that. So the purchase price of the property was $165,000. The cost for me to acquire the property was $48,656.12. And the reason for the difference is just because I had a mortgage, so I didn't pay in cash. Now, to calculate my average monthly cash flow, I just took my overall cash flow and divided it by 12. My cash-on-cash return is equal to my average monthly cash flow divided by my property acquisition cost. And then you have to multiply that number by 100. The only reason you have to multiply that number by 100 is because that's how you turn a decimal into a percent. So that leaves me with 10.4% cash-on-cash return. I'm really happy with that number. That's more than I was expecting, and so I'm definitely pleased. However, I know that this was a unique year because I didn't have any repairs or maintenance to deal with. So I would say this year isn't totally representative of what the average year would be, because in the long run, if I average out all of the years, I should have some maintenance and repairs to do. Now, another thing I wanted to calculate was the cap rate. Now, the reason I wanted to calculate the cap rate is because it's a way of looking at your property, ignoring your mortgage. Now, of course, you can't just ignore your mortgage. However, if someone else were to purchase the same exact property at the same time for the same purchase price, they would most likely end up with a different cash-on-cash return. And that's because the cash-on-cash return takes into account my mortgage payments. And my mortgage payments almost certainly would be different from anyone else's mortgage payments because my credit score is different than other people. The percent I put down is likely different than what other people would put, and just a couple other factors that would affect this. So the cap rate is just a more generalized number that takes into account the purchase price of the property and isn't affected by whatever mortgage you might get. One of the reasons that the cap rate can be helpful to look at is because some investors are able to get a mortgage with 0% down. Now, when you've put 0% down, your cash-on-cash return becomes infinity because your property acquisition costs are zero. So obviously, a cash-on-cash return of infinity is amazing, but it's also not exactly true. And if you're getting a mortgage with 0% down, then any single property you would purchase would look like an amazing property because every single property would have an acquisition cost of zero. Of course, not every property is an equally good investment, and so the cap rate is just another way of thinking about it, where you don't have to worry about your mortgage regardless of whether you plan on getting a mortgage or not. It's just a more generalized way of comparing different properties. So in order to actually calculate this cap rate, you have to figure out what your NOI is. That's your net operating income. Your net operating income is just your total rent minus any other expenses you would have, except for your mortgage payment. So you wouldn't subtract the $8,996.52, but you would subtract all of the property management fees. And you would also subtract any other repairs, maintenance, or other expenses that you would have. Now you might have noticed that this value just changed, it just decreased a bit. And the reason for that is because in explaining how to calculate it, I actually realized I calculated it wrong. So basically this number decreased, my NOI decreased. And the reason for that is because, as I was saying, you take the rent and then you subtract the property management fees and any other expenses you had for the year, but you don't subtract the mortgage payments. And that's how I got the value I had before. However, I just remembered that my mortgage payments aren't solely my mortgage payments. Because I have an escrow, my monthly mortgage payments also cover my property taxes and my insurance. And so all I did was subtract how much money I put into my escrow account in the past year. And so that's the only difference between this number and what I had before. Now to get it into a percentage, you take your NOI and then divide it by your purchase price. And again, because you want to get it into a percentage, you have to multiply by 100 to convert a decimal to a percentage. So that leaves me with cap rate of 7.1. It's not the most amazing cap rate ever. I know a lot of investors who aim for a cap rate of 8% or more. However, because this is my first property and I'm just trying to learn as much as I can without losing money, I'm actually pretty pleased by this cap rate. More seasoned investors probably would not be, unless they were going for appreciation and their property did appreciate a lot, then that would be different. That being said, these are all the numbers for the first year of owning my first property. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And if you could like and subscribe, that would be amazing. And I'll see you next time.